Hello, hello everyone. Hello, welcome to the Navavimers broadcast. Today we have a very special session for a book launch that was done recently. So we have Dr. Raja Bhaumik, a new author, a doctor who has written a book on Indian independence movement. Hello, doctor.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to be in in your presence.
No issues. No issues. Okay, so everybody, Dr. Bhaumik, so we would like to know a bit more about your journey of becoming an author. So if you could share a few words on your journey to becoming a doctor and an author.
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and namaste, everyone. I am Dr. Raja Bhaumik. I specialize in internal medicine, nephrology, diabetology, and critical care, practicing out of Hyderabad and Secunderabad. I took a call on writing this book uh, after certain politicians they were using unparliamentary languages against most of our freedom fighters, especially someone like Mr. Veer Savarkar. And what I realized is that we are not able to counter this propaganda because we ourselves are not backed by facts. So I realized that it was essential that for us to counter this negative propaganda,
Dr. Raja Bhomik, are
pass on the
you?
information to our younger generation. So that was the reason which actually, these were the reasons which prompted me to take up this particular work in the right earnest. And I decided to give my practice a miss, not completely, but certainly, but to a significant extent. I decided to give my practice a miss because I thought it was more important for us and also for our future generations to get acquainted with the truth and take pride in what our uh, freedom fighters had fought for and enabled us to see the light of this day. Without their effort, we would not have been walking in this free land. That was my
Thank you.
major this motivation.
Thank you. So you had
Welcome.
mentioned in your initial introduction that the events or the incidents regarding Vinayak Savarkar like encourage you or it motivated you to write this book. So can you delve into more into the incidents which actually motivated you to write this book? If you can shed a bit more light into that.
I myself, I was uh, feeling very uncomfortable of the fact that as an Indian, I was not aware of the various aspects of the Indian freedom struggle. Uh, this particular thing dawned on me when I was discussing with few of my friends, and each of us were talking of certain incidents which did not have anything in common, but which certainly gave rise to me, uh, rather gave rise in me that particular passion to find out how these various events were linked together. And I must thank Google for helping me to know in detail as to how each of these things happened, and also the chronicle, and also the timeline over which this all these things pettered out. I found during the course of my study that there was a significant gap in our knowledge as to as to what happened after a certain event, or actually what happened prior to a certain event. So as a result of which, therefore, I felt that what we know is only a piecemeal. We are not, we don't know the entire story, and ultimately, history is not. I mean, every each and every event in history is linked to one another. And until and unless you are able to join the dots, it makes no sense. We are going to read it on one day and forget it on the other simply because we are not able to connect the dots. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you for this very important information. So, as it is said that history is written by the winners, not by the losers.
Yes.
So, India or Bharat has been in occupation by various races in various times, from starting with the Islamic invasions to the Portuguese to Dutch and to English. So, your work in documenting, so there has been a lot of books written on Indian history. So would you like to shed more light into what your book has specific elements which are missing in other books which are written prior to this regarding India's independence struggle?
Yeah, certain aspects I want to, can really talk about. Like, for example, the clemency petitions of Savarkar. Except for the book which is written by Mr. Vikram Sampath, there is no other book in which there is a mention about the clemency petitions in detail.
That's very interesting.
As a result of which, what happens is that people are actually given to believe something which is actually a wrong information. Because as we know very well, 100 lies becomes a truth when it is repeated for the 101st time. So as
Yeah,
a
well
result
said.
of which, if I listen to that over a period of time, my friends also listen to that. The same thing, when it is being repeated over a period of time, it will be something which will be considered as a truth. And it will be very difficult to counter that sort of a negative propaganda, because the majority of the people have been fed with the lies.
Yes,
As a result of which, I felt that it was necessary that if I may use the word for lack of a better term, if I may be the person who takes on the responsibility to put forward, or to put across to the people what exactly happened. But I am not imposing my opinion on them. I am not imposing my opinion on them. I am just informing them of what happened.
you are
It is for the informed reader to now decide, to pick, to decide which is the truth and which is false. So my duty as an author is basically only to chronicle the facts, not impose my opinion on anyone. It is for them, after being informed of the fact which I have put forward to the best of my ability, to decide which one to consider.
Thank you. So my second question
And
to
I
you
must
would
add,
be,
and I'm sorry to interrupt, I
yeah,
must
yeah, yeah,
add
sure.
one thing. In Hyderabad, there is an organization by the name of Pragna Bharati.
Pragya Bharti.
Pragna Bharati, and the president emeritus of that organization is a 93-year-old gentleman by the name of Mr. Hanuman Chowdhury. I had the privilege of giving my book to him for his review, and he called me back after 10 days and informed me that, Dr. Bhaumik, your book stands out in the fact, on basis of the fact that you have not imposed your opinion. You have just chronicled the facts as they happened, and it is now for the informed reader to decide which one to choose. So in all aspects, your book is absolutely neutral. If I may use the word, your book is absolutely neutral, because it has only portrayed the facts as they happened, without imposing any sort of an opinion. any sort of an opinion on the reader. The reader is the ultimate person to decide which is correct and which is wrong.
Thank you. So yeah, the question was I was about to ask you is that you are not a person who writes history professionally, or it's a profession to write about things. So how was your family, your friends, uh, like the way they reacted when you said to your family and friend that I'm going to write a book on Indian history? So what was the
Uh,
reaction that you got from your family and friends, and also from patients, I might say?
yeah, I must first of all talk about my family. My family was a bit taken aback, because from the very beginning they found me that I was more interested in my profession, and I didn't take much of an interest in other things. But I must admit that it was during the lockdown that I decided to, make good use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way I could have done is actually to indulge myself into something which I felt I was ignorant of. And I was certainly ignorant of the Indian freedom movement because I heard so many quiz programs during the course of which certain questions were asked, of which unfortunately I was not having an idea, and I, as an Indian, certainly felt ashamed about. So therefore, that was the first thing that prompted me. And when I discussed it with my family, they were quite enthusiastic. Yes, there were, but then as time went on, and as the interest took hold of me, there were times when they were telling me that,
Dr. Bhaumik, I think
yeah,
your video is frozen. Are you able to hear us?
yeah, I'm able to hear you.
Audience, can you hear me? Yeah, Mr. Bhaumik, you are back.
Thank you. So as my interest grew in reading and writing, at times they certainly felt that I was ignoring my profession. But I had the backing of my patients. So what, like few of my patients, they told me is that Dr. Saab, when we needed you, you were there. And and now that your call is from something else, you must do justice to that. So they were very, very cooperative, and in my acknowledgement, I have made a mention of that as well, because without their cooperation, it would have been it would have been difficult. And there were many friends, many, if I may use the word, junior colleagues of mine who took it upon them that, sir, you have been also teaching us from time to time. So we will try to put your teachings into action, and then we will only disturb you when we feel that the problem is beyond us. So in a way, it was a good way to understand who your real friends are. And I must admit that I am fortunate enough to have lot many names in that list. Of course,
Sure.
it doesn't exceed the list on the bibliography that I have for my book, but it is a considerable one.
I think you are a lucky and blessed man. So you have family, friends, and also patients supporting you in your endeavor
Sure, sure, without
to
a
write
doubt.
this book. So my question would be that you are not a professional history writer. So when you wrote the book and when you went to the publishers for them to request them to review and publish them from their publishing house, what was the reaction? We would like to know, and that would be, I think, the audience also would like to know. The audience would be interested to know that how a medical doctor writes a history book, and he goes to a publisher and says, "I have wrote a book. Can you publish it?" from your publishing house? What was the reaction that you had received from them?
Yeah. The first thing that actually took them aback was the fact that how come a doctor in medical science is taking interest in historical science, if I may use the word. So I told them that the thing that is common between the two is science. So one deals with the body as an individual, and the other deals with the body of evidence that our ancestors have left us with. So in a way, we are actually dealing with bodies. You know, we in the present we are dealing with the living human body, and when we talk about history, we are talking about people who are unfortunately not a part of this world. But they have left their imprint in ways which is significant in more ways than one. And I believe that if we do not learn from history, we are condemned. We are
Yeah.
condemned.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
please tell me. So
Yeah.
if we,
So
like,
yeah, you can finish, then I'll add the next question. Go ahead.
yeah. So actually, so therefore, in that case, therefore, like for example, as a doctor, I believe in the fact that when you are talking to the patient, you need to inquire in detail as to what happened in the past. If you do not know that, then basically you are actually swimming in the deep sea. It is only when you get to know what happened in the past that you are able to relate to the present. Similarly, when we are talking, for example, about the present uh, political scenario in India, until unless you know what happened during those critical days, okay, what happened in those critical days, it is very difficult for someone to understand as to why it happened the way it had. For example, you talk about partition, you talk about the communal violence, you talk about XYZ, okay? You will, everything is related to the past. It is the past that becomes the present and which ultimately ultimately lays the foundation for the future. This is what I believe. And therefore, history by itself certainly appealed to me. Also, my mother, other than the fact that she is a very expert, she is very much proficient in Hindustani classical music. She also did her MA in modern history. So I think history does run in my blood to some extent. And that is embodied in the fact that I like to take a detailed history of my patient. I spend at least 45 minutes during the first visit of the patient trying to understand how the things happened in him or her, and also about the entire family. What is the genetic background? What are their habits, dietary habits, etc., etc. So history in various forms is something which I really like to deal with.
Well said. So to top up on that specific part of medical history of a patient, so in Ayurveda, the ancient medical system that we had and we still have, the medical history is paramount information to diagnose the disease. So
Yes.
as we say that if we want to understand what's happening today, politically or sociologically, we have to go back in history and read about it. Only we can make sense of it. Okay,
And I
so
will
we'll
tell
go back to
you,
the. Hmm.
and I will tell you that is the reason as to why I've used this quote from the very famous American author, if you Pearl S. Buck. If you want to understand today, you must search yesterday. That is where our history comes from.
Yeah, I have your book with me, the physical copy, so I can share it to the audience. Not sure how much you can read it, but this is the quote which is the doctor is talking about. So we will also be having a reading session with Dr. Bhaumik in few minutes before after we finish our initial introductory session. So, Dr. Bhaumik, the last question before we go and reading the book, that would be that you are a medical doctor, you wrote a history book, and you got your book published by a publisher. What happened after that? Because the initial struggles of finding a publisher, getting the book published, is a huge struggle itself. But how was your experience after the book is published and while putting it on the Amazon or selling the book? So how was your experience? And would you like to share something, your experience? There's somebody from our audience wants to write a book and they are not an author. What advice you would give to people who are not authors and they want to write a book? And once the book is published, how they would approach the marketing part of it, how they would make sure that their books are being noticed, their books are being discussed in social media or in other platforms.
Uh, the most important thing about writing a book is that you must have the conviction and also the determination that under all odds you are going to give birth, if I may use the word, that you are going to give birth to something new which other people will cherish. So until unless you are convinced about that particular line of thought, on that line of thought, it is very difficult, because in today's world where there are so many things to be looked after, there will be multiple occasions on which you might as well have second thoughts about the thing that you have chosen to do. And ultimately, if you are not convinced that yes, you are on the right track and you are basically answering a call of your soul, you will not be able to do justice to what you want. Either you might stop writing midway, or the quality of your research and writing and everything may suffer because you want to cut corners. If you want to cut corners, you yourself will be feeling guilty of your omissions and commissions at the end of the day. So the most important thing that you must have is that you must be true to yourself when you are writing the book, because ultimately the people who will read the book will get to understand and realize how much of effort you really put into that. And ultimately your book sells by word of mouth. Even on platforms like Amazon, or even on physical platforms where you talk to people about your book, until unless you are convinced and you are absolutely sure of what you have written and for what you have written, it is very difficult for you to see light at the end of the tunnel. Because truth will be out. Truth will make its presence felt in one way or the other. But certainly, if you are not true to your efforts, it will show up. It is just like our profession. If in our profession we are not working with the right earnest, at one point of time we are going to hit the wall. The same thing applies over here as well. I personally, with regards to my publisher, Mr. Vinith Gera from Gurukul Publications, I am very, very grateful to him because he gave me that wonderful opportunity and confidence that said everything will be done. Because I first of all introduced him to the manuscript, and he had the patience to go through it for the first few days, and within the first week he got back to me with the feedback that, sir, this book is amazing and it must see the light of the day. And as an author, I don't think you can get a better compliment. So therefore,
Yes,
therefore, my work, if I can use the word, my work became much, much simpler from that time on. And once the book was published, and once I started sharing some of the anecdotes with with my friends, it made my day. And believe you me, most of the people who have gone through the book, they have again taken the trouble to inform me that there were so many things which they did not know, and it has been put forward in a very, very simple language so that even a small child can also acquire the knowledge from the book. It doesn't require of you to sit the you know to keep a dictionary by your side when you are reading the book. Just simple English. It is very, very simple English. And I was fortunate enough to receive an award for this book in the month of July. And what I told the audience during that particular ceremony is that it doesn't require you to read the book every day. Even if it is not a part of the children's curriculum, over the weekend they can just read 10 pages and they can share that knowledge with people whom they come across. So, it has, and actually I met Mr. Mandal during the recently concluded Jaipur Dialogues in Jaipur. And I must say that I was overwhelmed by the response of even very prominent and eminent people who had come to talk to us at the Jaipur Dialogues. So I do think and I do believe that there is some amount of truth, if not a significant amount of truth, in what I have written. Otherwise, it would not have. It's already more than a year since the book was published. I don't think it would have lasted so long if the things were not up to the expectations, or things were not as per what the truth really was.
thank you. So I think I am done with my initial questions. So what I will do is I'll request Dr. Bhumik to read a specific passage of his book to our audience to give them a taste what they will be enjoying or learning about when they buy the book. And we have pinned the Amazon link in our description. So people who want to buy the book, they can click on the link and they can buy the book. So Dr. Bhaumik, so now what I will do is I'll just so I would request you to read from your physical book that you have, and we will also be sharing the exact page number in the screen sharing session that we are having, so the audience also can read with you. So over to you, Dr. Bhumik. Please go ahead.
I must thank for the patience with which Mr. Mandal has conducted the interview so far. It has been my utmost pleasure to let everyone know about the things which prompted me to bring out with this book. And I'm so very much thankful to Mr. Mandal. We only got to know each other during the recently concluded Jaipur Dialogues only on 2 days, And on the very third day, he came back to me and told, "Sir, we must have a podcast." But unfortunately, because of my professional commitments, both when I was there at Jaipur and subsequently after I came back to Hyderabad, that this podcast had to be postponed on 2 days. And ultimately, I think it was destiny that that we ultimately this podcast was could it could see the light of the day a day before Kali Puja. So everything is destined, and I think destiny actually brings us together and takes us apart. But I am sure with Mr. Mandal that even destiny will not be able to take us apart.
Sure, sure.
I leave it to Dr. Mandal to give his opinion.
Yeah, I think destiny is something which I believe in. So we as individuals can do our part, but we should leave few things to the destiny, to the God and Lord above us to guide us.
Thank you, and
Yeah,
we must all thank destiny for bringing us together.
yes, that's very important part of life. Do what you need to do, and what your karma is, and leave the fruits of your karma to the Lord who will give it to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have the passage which
Just to
you.
inform, I am now writing my second book.
Uh,
I am now writing my second book, which deals with the events in Europe leading up to World War One and how events in World War One impacted the Indian freedom movement.
that's very interesting because I have not seen a lot of work being done. So there is a couple of papers which are written which document the Indian freedom struggle as a mirror image of nationalistic feelings and passions which were there in the Europe. So,
Yes.
in a lot of documentation, a lot of papers, books, the Indian freedom struggle or the national struggle was equated with the far right nationalistic movements which were happening in Europe. So, your book might shed more light into this, but there is a misconception that the Indian nationalist movement is somehow right wing, radical in terms of its approach towards politics. So your book might give a befitting reply to those specific documentations and give a real picture of what really means when you talk about the Indian national movement and the nationalistic movements which took place, which led to the our independence.
Especially, it is important from the fact that uh, the events which were based out of India House in London, led by Mr. Veer Savarkar, ultimately in 1910-11, it shifted completely to Berlin and Paris. And it was in Berlin, especially, that Mr. Virendranath Chattopadhyay, the brother of Sarojini Naidu, he took the lead in organizing a meeting with Kaiser Wilhelm II and assured him that India is now ready for revolution, provided it is supported by some foreign powers who were against the English. And who best could that be other than Germany? So that particular link was did play an important role in what happened in India during the World War, and if the tools of communication were as developed as it is today, most of us will be surprised to know that India would have got independence during the First World War itself. So I am going to talk, it is my earnest desire to ensure that I write all these events and then put it for posterity so that everyone gains from that knowledge. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Thank you, and I think we wish best of luck on your second book. So now we're going to read the specific passage regarding
Yeah,
Savarkar's cellular jail experience. So, Doctor, go ahead and read and the audience will also read it with you on the screen.
yeah. So the first topic which I'm going to read is because of the fact there is a lot of confusion. There is a lot of negative propaganda about this particular event, and it has shown a person like Mr. Savarkar in very poor light, which he doesn't deserve at all. He doesn't deserve at all. So this particular thing I have written as a part of the events which happened once Mr. Veer Savarkar entered the cellular jail, and then subsequently. So as it is clearly mentioned on the in the book also, that it was on 30th of June 1911 that Mr. Savarkar set foot in the cellular jail at Port Blair in Andaman. And upon reaching cellular jail, upon arriving at the cellular jail, he was taken to the office of Mr. David Barry, who was the Irish jailer of the cellular jail, and he took it upon himself to explain the rules which were to be followed in the cellular jail, and to make and to make it evident to Mr. Savarkar that his stay was not going to be a pleasant one, he was sentenced to solitary confinement for 6 months. During Prior to Mr. Savarkar being incarcerated in the cellular jail, his elder brother was also there in the cellular jail since 1910. So during the course of his stay in the cellular jail, now the last time that the two brothers met was in June 1906, prior to Mr. Savarkar leaving for London. And at that time, Mr. Ganesh Savarkar, the elder brother of Mr. Veer Savarkar, was was having high hopes for Mr. Savarkar to settle as a barrister, either in the UK or in India. But once they met in the premises of the cellular jail, the two brothers were shocked
I think we
because
lost Dr.
huh?
Bhaumik for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Dr. Bhaumik, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Bhaumik, please go ahead. I think we lost you for a few seconds.
Yeah. So at that time, Mr. Ganesh Savarkar, on account of the unhygienic conditions prevailing within the cellular jail, coupled with poor nutrition, was suffering from symptoms which were suggestive of tuberculosis, for which at that point in time there was no treatment really available.
Audience, am I audible to? Audience, am I audible to you? Can you just confirm? Let me just connect with him over a phone. Yeah. Hello.
Hello?
Yeah. There was some connectivity issue, so we lost you for a few minutes, most probably. You can go ahead with the reading.
Okay. Now, by August 1911, Mr. Savarkar was informed from the Bombay University that his degree has that his degree was cancelled. So he was ultimately only a class 12 pass student. Now in December 1911 was held the Delhi Darbar, in which the King of England, King George, and his wife, that is Queen Mary, were officially anointed as the Emperor of India and the Empress of British India. And during this period, as a part of the process, the royal couple, they were uh, they were given a list of prisoners who could be granted pardon. Mr. Veer Savarkar, in spite of him realizing that he was in jail for a very, very short time, and both he and Mr. Ganesh Savarkar were designated as dangerous prisoners, did take the plunge in writing a clemency petition to King George V. Surprisingly, there was no mention of their release. What he spoke of in that particular clemency petition was that if the British wanted the Indians to cooperate with them, it was necessary for them also to cooperate with the Indians, and this could certainly be put forward if the prisoners were released. In none of the in that petition or subsequent to that, the many other petitions that Mr. Savarkar wrote, was any mention made of their release. They had even mentioned about the inhuman conditions which forced inmates like Ullashkar Datto and Indubhushan Rai to ultimately fall on bad days. Mr. Indubhushan Rai had committed suicide, and Mr. Ullashkar Datto, unable to put up with the torture, lost his mental balance and was shifted to Madras. Now, each of the clemency petitions which Mr. Savarkar wrote, Mr. Vinayak Savarkar wrote, never made a mention or never requested or never put forward a request for the release of both the brothers. A lot of a lot of controversy is there on the basis of the fact that each of these clemency letters ultimately ended with your obedient servant. Certain people, they have taken up the cause to put it across to us Indians that your obedient servant means that Mr. Savarkar had accepted that the British were his ultimate rulers. But that is absolutely false. The reason being that most of the political prisoners at that point of time used to write letters to their, to the Viceroy or to the King of England, seeking for a redressal, and in that letter it ended with your most obedient servant. The most important person who wrote a letter on similar lines was Mr. Gandhi. In that letter, Mr. Gandhi had clearly explained that he felt proud to be a servant of the British Empire, and which, as a result of which, he was forced to take the sides of the British during the Boer War and also during the First World War when he was in England. Mr. Savarkar never declared for himself that he was an obedient servant of the British Empire. So and another thing is that Mr. Sheikh Abdullah, the father of Mr. Farooq Abdullah, in September 1947, he wrote a letter to Maharaja Hari Singh seeking for his release, and there too the letter ended with that particular sentence, your most obedient servant. So which therefore means that it was the norm of each and every political prisoner to use the word most obedient servant so that they could expect for them a faster release. And Mr. Savarkar was of the opinion that it is better not to die in the prison, but better to come out, energize yourself, and get ready for the battle which lies ahead of you. This is not dealt with in any of the books which I have read, except for the book on Mr. Savarkar, which is written by Mr. Vikram Sampath. But the reason why I decided to write it also and include the petitions for the various other political prisoners was that to emphasize that this is the way that the letters by the political prisoners were all written to the British at that point in time. So therefore, there is nothing to be ashamed of, and in no way has Mr. Savarkar ever made it clear that it is for the release of him and his brother that he was writing the letters. It was in no way related to their release, and it was certainly done in an altruistic manner, wherein he wanted the prisoners, and the prisoners to be released, so that a message could be sent across to Indians that the Britishers have changed their tactics for the good, by which the various reforms which the Britishers were forced to introduce upon the threat of the revolutionaries could slowly and slowly start taking, could slowly and slowly come into effect. So that is the first thing that I wanted to bring forth about the clemency petitions. So as you can read over there, I have written that since both the brothers were categorized as dangerous prisoners, knowing fully well that their release was not a possibility, the clemency petitions were put forward so many times by Mr. Vinayak Savarkar with the hope that only those particular prisoners can be released whose release will actually send a message of goodwill to the Indians. So this is the most important thing that I wanted to bring to the fore.
Sure. Yeah. So, Dr. Bhaumik, you are able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now your video is a little bit freezing, so that's what I'm just confirming. Your video has frozen, so Dr. Bhaumik.
There is no issue
Yeah.
of audio or video on the live.
Now
You
this is
can
better.
go ahead. Yeah.
You can turn off the video if you are having any connection issue, so that we can also.
No. He's not having any problems in the live, YouTube live. You can go ahead with the.
Dr. Bhaumik, are you able to hear me?
Yes. Absolutely
Okay.
Fine and clear.
Yeah. Now your video is very clear. Thank you. Okay. So now my question regarding the session, the first reading session that you did on Dr. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar clemency petition. So, as you mentioned, only Vikram Sampath and you have actually provided the right information regarding his clemency petition, which he wrote to the king and also to the viceroy. So, what do you think? Why this information, which is already available in public, was not published?
Now, see the clemency petitions which Mr. Vikram Sampath has highlighted in his book. It actually is an individualistic clemency petition which he has put forward. But what I felt is that I am too small when I compare myself to Mr. Vikram Sampath. But what I felt was that in that particular clemency petition, there was not a sort of there was no summary wherein, for example, he has mentioned that about what the clemency petitions were about. Like, for example, I described that the clemency petitions at no point of time it concerned him, Mr. Vinay Savarkar or his brother Ganesh Savarkar. At the same time, what I felt is that about the clemency petitions, there was no comparison between the clemency petitions written by other people, including Mr. Gandhi, and that written by Mr. Vinayak Savarkar, or that written by Sheikh Abdullah. Because what I felt is that if we could bring to light, in what way the letters were ultimately addressed to the British, we could then reach a common platform from where each of these letters could be judged. So therefore, what I realized for myself is that if we analyze each of these letters, especially the way that they ultimately addressed, sorry, they ultimately addressed the higher authorities, it was, there was in no way, it was in no way possible to decide that only Mr. Savarkar had declared himself as an obedient servant. In that premise, each and every political prisoner must be accused of declaring himself or herself as an obedient servant of the British Empire, including Mr. Gandhi. So therefore, there is no truth when we only blame Mr. Savarkar that on the basis of his clemency petition, he has declared himself as an obedient servant of the British Empire. To me, it was far from truth, and it was something that each and every one of us should be informed. And therefore, we should feel proud of the fact that Mr. Savarkar was the doyen of the Indian, was one of the doyens of the Indian freedom movement.
Thank you, Doctor, for this insight into the clemency petitions written by various political prisoners during the British Raj, and not sure why only Mr. Savarkar was identified as it is called in a very bad way, Maafi Veer. So he was tagged as Maafi Veer by various authors and few people, and they conveniently forgot to mention that the same kind of letters were written by almost all the political prisoners during the British Raj. Yeah, Doctor, able to hear me, Dr. Bhaumik?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So now I'll go to the next question, and the next question is regarding your, when you were writing this book, as you mentioned, correct? So when a new author is writing a book, they require dedication and passion to actually go ahead and write the book, cross all the hurdles which might come in their way while writing this book. So can you recount a specific incidents which actually gave you more dedication to writing this book, something which inspired you in spite of all the issues that you had while writing the book?
Let me share with everyone concerned that it is my good fortune that almost every 2 weeks, one particular Sunday, every 2 weeks, all of us used to sit. Means we live in a joint family. I have a twin brother by the name of Mr. Rana Bhaumik. He's a chartered accountant. So my parents, my family, and Rana's family, together we are about 10 people strong. So we all sat together once every 2 weeks, and I used to read out to them what I have written during that period. And to my amazement, not only the children, but even most of us, we were unaware of the things that I had written, of the events that I had written. So when they used to express their amazement at what I had put on paper, I think that gave me that additional motivation to really put it forward and to further, to further actually cement my point of view. I used to discuss these things with few of my patients and few of my other friends, including doctors, and they also used to express their amazement at what I had written. Each of these things then, and few of my patients, I must add over here, when they came to know of these facts, they told Dr. Saab, you please spend as much time as you want. You let us know when you are free. then only we will come and consult you. Because what you are doing is something that is difficult for us to conjure during our lifetime. So it was so encouraging and it was so rewarding for me that I decided that come what may, I must give shape to what I have decided to in the right earnest.
Sure. Yeah, I think your words would inspire many of us, many of in the audience, and somebody who is listening to this recording once it's uploaded, they might also get inspired to write do something that we have done. It's really an achievement for a common person like you. We are a common individuals. We have our own issues, we have our jobs, we have our families to take care of. In spite of having all these things, finding time, working towards it, problem solving, and end of the day achieving something that you had a goal in mind, and getting it done and getting it published, and the book is being appreciated by many of you, as you have mentioned, shared. It's a really great achievement and inspiration to everybody who's listening to this, that no matter what the problems that we have, if we have the dedication and the passion towards our goals, one day they can become a reality.
Thank you.
So we will go to the next reading. So, and the next reading is going to be on, I think we already have the page prepped. So, Dr. Bhaumik, could you go ahead and introduce the next reading page we'll do?
Yes. The next event which I am going to briefly talk about is the Rodda arms heist. And this Rodda arms heist actually shows to what extent our revolutionaries were ready to take all the hardships upon themselves, including the fact that they were ready to sacrifice their life at the foot of Bharat Mata. And we have to really appreciate this particular line of thought, because I think that is what our soldiers in the Indian army, in the Indian armed forces are imbued with. And it is a blessing that they have really been able to do justice to what they feel that Bharat Mata has entrusted them with. So let me start reading about the Rodda arms heist. Now, the Rodda arms heist, it actually took place after the Alipur bomb conspiracy case, which implicated Aurobindo Ghosh. Of course, he was subsequently released because of lack of evidence, as was proved by his lawyer, Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das. And after that, Bharin Ghosh also, he was initially sentenced to death, which was ultimately commuted to life sentence in the cellular jail. So when the Rodda arms heist actually took place, by that time, most of the Jugantar Samiti in Calcutta had actually lost its principal controllers, if I may use the word. And it was then Mr. Jyotindra Mohan Mukherjee, Jyotindra Chandra Chatterjee, Mr. Mukherjee or Bagha Jyotin, who took control of this particular group. So now let me read through the Rodda arms heist. With the closure of the Maniktala Garden Secret Society, following the bomb attack at Muzaffarpur in April 1908, in which Prafullo Chaki and Khudiram Bose ultimately martyred their life, the revolutionaries involved were facing shortages of funds and arms. And this was accentuated by the arrest of Bagha Jyotin in the Howrah-Shivpur conspiracy case of 1910-1911. At that point in time, the principal source of arms was Chandarnagar, which was a French colony. In the middle of 1914, the revolutionaries, they now had come again into prominence, and they started and they started planning ways and means to get hold of arms. The outbreak of World War I in August 1914 came as a blessing for the revolutionaries as the circulation of arms and ammunition increased through the official channel. And one such official channel was a Calcutta-based British arms company, Messrs. Rodda and Company, which used to import a lot of arms. Now, to cut the long story short, in August 1914, on the evening of in August 1914, this particular activity, or rather this daring action was planned, and it was planned that it will be done around the 22nd of August 1914. So on the evening of 25th August 1914, a young Mr. Srishpal or Noren, he took one of the persons by the name of Mr. Haridas Datta to the room of a young Marwari student by the name of Mr. Prabhudayal Himmat Singha. He was the person who was entrusted with actually dressing up Mr. Haridas Datta as a Hindustani bullock cart driver. And he was to be addressed as Atul for this operation. That is Haridas Datta was to be addressed as Atul for the particular operation. Another person by the name of Mr. Anukul Chandra Mukherjee was given the responsibility for arranging bullock carts, especially the 7th bullock cart, which was to be utilized for this particular heist. So on the morning of 26th of August 1914, 4 young men, they took their places on Dalhousie Square, which today is known as BBD Bagh in Calcutta, and they were to keep watch on the officials from the Intelligence Bureau, and if anything suspicious was spotted. In such a scenario, they were to inform Mr. Ashutosh Roy, who would inform the lead group. The lead group contained one person by the name of Mr. Srish Mitro or Habu, who was working in the Rodda Arms Company, and who was in charge of actually unloading all the weapons that were arriving in the Calcutta dockyard designated for the Rodda Arms Company. So as a result of which, therefore, the entire operation was very well planned. Okay, so the group, that is Mr. Srish Pal or Noren, Mr. Srish Mutro or Habu, Mr. Horidas Datto, who was dressed as the cart driver by the name of Atul, and Mr. Khogen Das, they met at Malongo Lane to discuss the last minute details. Mr. Anukul Chandra Mukherjee, who was a prominent leader in the local area, handed them over a loaded revolver along with a cyanide capsule, so that if they were challenged by the officials, they would commit suicide and would not fall into the hands of the police. Such was the degree of motivation in these young people that they were ready to lay down their lives for Bharat Mata. Now, as part of the plan, the 7th bullock cart, which was driven by Mr. Atul, it arrived late at the customs house, where all the arms and ammunitions have arrived, and they were to be cleared by Mr. Habu or Mr. Srish Mitro, and then subsequently loaded on to the bullock carts and then delivered to the office of Rodda Arms Company. Now, while Mr. Srish Mitra or Mr. Habu went into the building to collect the consignment, Mr. Haridas Datta or Atul, he placed his bullock cart behind the 6th cart as planned and and waited for the arrival of Mr. Srish Mitra or Habu. Once Mr. Srish Mitra and Habu arrived at the scene with all the material, Mr. Srish Mitra ensured that only those particular vital consignments which were which were containing the Mossad pistols and the ammunition, they were loaded into the seventh cart. Once the loading was done, Mr. Habu or Mr. Srish Mitra, he led the convoy, and the other people, they walked by the side of the seventh bullock cart to ensure that that particular cart never raised even an iota of suspicion in the mind of the various intelligence officials who were present along that route. Now, as the convoy then headed for the company, which was situated at Vansitat Row, and the seventh cart, which was, and as it approached the godown, the seventh cart suddenly broke ranks, and it started driving in the other direction. Luckily, at that time, there was some bit of rain, as a result of which, therefore, the entire operation could go the way that it was planned. Now, as soon as this particular seventh cart, it reached a local, godown, iron yard, immediately Mr. Srish Mitra, he left the company godown on the pretext that the seventh cart was missing and he had to go to bring it back. The seventh cart, on reaching the iron yard, was unloaded, and Mr. Srish Mitra or Habu immediately left in the company of Mr. Srish Pal or Noren. Immediately they left for the station to board the Darjeeling mail. Mr. Srish Mitra, ultimately he got down at a place called Rangpur, and from there he proceeded further towards North Bengal. It took the people at the Rodda Arms Company about a week's time to realize that the seventh cart, but those valuable consignments were missing. And then they decided to launch a hunt for Mr. Srish Mitra. But by that time, Mr. Srish Mitra had already disappeared. And this particular operation, it was so well planned that even the British police, they were actually taken unawares, and they were not able to understand as to what hit them. They were then ready to cover their, to actually cover their shortcomings and to see as to how those arms could be retrieved. Because in course of time, these arms were handed over to the various revolutionary organizations, which at that time were operating out of Bengal, Bihar, and North India, including as it reached people as far as Punjab as well. And it will be very interesting for you to note that when Mr. Bagajotin attained martyrdom, most of the pistols which were in his possession were ultimately traced to the Rodda arms system. So it is really interesting to understand to what extent our revolutionaries, who I feel are the unsung heroes of the Indian freedom struggle, really, they really put for, they were ready for the supreme sacrifice. And they took so much of hardship with only one thing in mind, and that is the freedom of Bharat Mata. This dedication, I think, is something which, something which is lost on us. And if we do not share this, these glorious stories with our children or with the next of our kin, they will be lost for good. They will be lost for good. And I don't think it is the proper way by which we can pay homage to these great souls.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaumik, for this wonderful reading. I think you can have some water when
Thank
I'm
you.
talking about it, so that you can read the next chapter in much better way. So my question to you would be, while you are reading this book, reading this chapter on the Indian revolutionary movement and the revolutionaries from Bengal specifically, who were at the forefront of challenging the British Empire and waging a war, basically a war against the political subjugation of Indian people, there has been not much written in terms of volume and mass that we see in other aspects. Like we see a lot of books, a lot of commentaries are there on Nehru, Patel, Gandhi. What do you think? Has enough been written about the Indian revolutionary movement, especially in Bengal, in Punjab, or in some other parts of India? Is there enough documentation, enough books written about the revolutionary movement and the people who were carrying out this in modern history?
See, what I am of the opinion is that it was a sort of a conspiracy, if I can use the word, to put down the revolutionaries. There is enough of material which is available still, which because see most of the things that I just actually discussed with each of you is mostly culled from the internet and culled from the relevant books. And and if they are available on the internet, if they are available in the books, then certainly it means that the documents are still available for us to go through. Unfortunately, what I feel is that from the very beginning, our things are actually we have not been encouraged, if I can use the word, we have not been encouraged to find out much about about our revolutionaries. But there are so many reasons that it could be, it could be attributed to, but we have not been encouraged. Our history books are not, our history book do not contain chapters which are talking about this particular events and the noble souls who were associated with this particular movements. It might be either a political a political dogma or a religious dogma that prevented this sort of events from coming to light. But at the end of it, we must understand that we want freedom because of all, whether it be the revolutionaries or whether it be otherwise. But at the end of it, if truth be told, it was the revolutionaries led by Netaji Subhas Bose who was responsible for making the British to realize that their days in India are numbered. And unfortunately, Netaji Subhas Bose did not live to see the day. That is the topic of my fourth book. The various controversies associated with the disappearance of Netaji.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaumik. So the next question, which relates to your first answer, that would be, there has been few movies which were released on Bhagat Singh and also on revolutionaries in Bengal. So what do you think? The movies which were made based on their lives, based on the incidents which happened during the freedom struggle, have they done justice to the martyred souls who fought for us in the celluloid form when they were made into movies? And have you watched any one of them?
I have not watched. I have not been privileged to watch these movies. Rather fortunate enough. But what I feel is that rather than films, it will be books that will stand the test of time, because it is through books that our generation and the people who follow will be able to go through these accounts, because after a certain period, these films will not be available anymore on the platforms that we choose to see them on. It can be either in the theater, or it can be on the OTT, or whatever it may be. Okay, so in course of time, other movies will come to replace them. So as a result of which, it is the books which are going to stand the test of time. And that is the reason why I am planning to write in my second or third book as to how, the revolutionary events which happened in various parts of British India, whether it be in Punjab, whether it be in United Provinces, whether it be in Bihar, whether it be in Bengal, they were not an isolated incident, but they were a part of a chain of events. Unfortunately, most of these particular movies, the names of which we have made a mention of, they actually try to talk about the revolutionaries only as if they were restricted only to a certain part of the country. No, they were traveling across the parts of the country with the sole aim of bringing as many people as they could under one roof, and then launch a revolution that would force the British to leave India. So my endeavor will be, as a part of my second book, to bring all, to actually interconnect all these events, show them as a single event, and tell them that even in those days, a lot of coordination existed between these particular people as they moved across the country under the threat of death. Because at any point of time they could be captured, and everyone knew what their fate would be. So my particular endeavor is to bring out all the revolutionary movements under one head. To start with, it started with India House in London, which was there starting from 1905. And as a part of these events, like say for example, India House, ultimately it was taken over by the Indian Committee of the East, Intelligence Committee of the East, during the course of the World War I. In the course of World War I, the Germans were able to link up with the British, with the revolutionaries from the west coast of North America, that is the Ghadar movement, which was in course of time led by Mr. Rajbihari Bose in Punjab and United Provinces, and in Bengal through Mr. Jatin Mukherjee, whom we also know as Bhaga Jatin. So all these things, and then after the First World War came Mr. Sachindranath Sanyal, who started with the Hindustan Republic Socialist Association, to which Mr. Sardar Bhagat Singh and Mr. Chandrasekhar Azad got associated with. So these were all a sort of a coordinated event across various parts of India. Ultimately, they did not see the light of the day because of poor communication, because of the presence of traitors, and because of the high-handedness which was adopted by the British. But at the end of it, we must understand that even Netaji drew inspiration from these revolutionaries, and it was his Indian National Army which made the British forced the British to realize that their days in India is numbered. And Mr. Clement Attlee, the British Prime Minister, who is credited with granting India the freedom. It is not a freedom, it is the transfer of power, leading to the formation of the dominions of India and Pakistan. Mr. Clement Attlee during the course of his visit to free India in Calcutta, made it very clear that it was the INA struggle led by Netaji Subhas Bose which did play a significant role in making the people to decide, in making the British to decide that it is time that they left India. So therefore, it is the revolutionaries who had the final say in the departure of the British from India. Very sorry to say that I might be going against the conventional line of thought, but it is true that it is the revolutionaries who ultimately forced the British to see the writing on the wall. The moderates did not have a significant role in that, and this was also very clearly put forward by Mr. Clement Attlee when he visited India in 1953 after he left office as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Very, very clearly it has been written, and it has been declared, and it has been put in writing that it was the revolutionaries led by Netaji who ultimately forced the British to call it a day when it came to India.
Thank you, Dr. Bhaumik, for this wonderful answer. So, just one observation. You mentioned transfer of power. India was a subjugated country. How a country which was subjugated under a foreign rule can be classified as transfer of power in the official documentation?
The British, see, it is like, see, the British made it very clear that even though the independence of India bill was stable in the British Parliament, ultimately it is mostly written as transfer of power. They have not declared India independent. And number one. Number two, they had transferred the power not to India, but they had transferred the power to two dominions, the Dominion of India and the Dominion of Pakistan. They have not mentioned, sorry, they have not mentioned the independence of two new countries. Even though they created two new countries in the form of India and Pakistan, it was not their independence. It was through the transfer of power that they were divided into two dominions, to which now came direct, which was still under the control of the British Parliament and the Crown. Let us make it very clear that there is a difference between dominion and independence. When you talk of independence, your parliament or your bodies of the government, they are not under the control of any other power except the people of that particular country, for example, India. When you declare dominion status, the dominion status means that even though your parliament is able to enact laws for Indians, for example, those acts will have to be ratified by the British Parliament and by the Crown before they become a law. So therefore, even though you are granted a dominion status, you are not free. So if you consider, so therefore now if you take the example of Australia, Australia is considered still to be a dominion because ultimately, and that is the reason as to why the Australians are so much interested to ensure that the rule of the Crown is abrogated for good. Even New Zealand, only few years back, some of the Caribbean islands, they have also declared that they are free even though they are a member of the British Commonwealth, but they are free of the crown. The same movement is gaining ground even in places like Australia and New Zealand. So transfer of power, basically, it only meant that we are being provided with the dominion status, not independence. We got independence only once our constitution came into effect. So that is the time from when, that is the 26th of January 1950, on which day India India adopted its own constitution. From that day, it declared that it is no longer under the crown. Even though it is a member of the Commonwealth, but it is no longer under the crown. So India did not gain independence on 15th of August 1947. There was a transfer of power only, but there was no independence.
That's very interesting observation that you have made, Doctor. That technically India gained this independence not in 1947, but in 1951, when officially the Parliament of India adopted the constitution written by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar.
Even the same thing holds good for Pakistan as well. That is the reason as to why India became a republic, and so did Pakistan become a republic, and that is how they were able to get rid of the foreign yoke, if I may put it so. That is how it happened. So therefore when we tell that India gained independence on 15th of August 1947, it is technically wrong. India gained independence because only on the day that India became a republic, on the 26th of January 1950, because that was the day when we declared ourselves free of the English crown and the British Parliament.
That's very, very important thing that even I did not know about, only because we were discussing this and you mentioned specific word, transfer of power, that it came to my mind right now that, okay, what does it exactly mean when we say transfer of power? So I think for me and also for the audience who are listening to this and others who will be listening to this later as a recording, it would be a revelation for them. So can you like quote some documentation or somewhere we can find this information that in terms of technicalities of declaring?
You see, this basically I got to read. When I was reading the book Jinnah, okay, written by Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed. Okay, there I got to understand as to why Jinnah was in favor of India and subsequently Pakistan, or if not a united India once the British leaves, to be declared a dominion. His primary reason for asking for a dominion status, if India could not be partitioned into India and Pakistan, was to ensure that the British always remained in control. And through them, he could then force the Hindus to adopt a conciliatory approach toward the Muslims. There is a significant difference between Gandhi and Jinnah. Jinnah wanted India to be partitioned before the British left. Gandhi wanted the partition of India to be done, if at all, after the British left, because he was of the opinion that the communalization of the Indian polity was a gift of the British. So once the British left, Hindus and Muslims would again start living together. This was further supported by Mr. Nehru, who was a staunch socialist and who never took into account the communal question. Mr. Jinnah always was steadfast in his approach that India must be divided because of the two-nation theory. I want to bring to the notice of each and everyone that the two-nation theory was not something which grew out of Jinnah's mind. The two-nation theory was in vogue from as far as 1887, and it was put forward by Syed Ahmad Khan, who laid the foundation of the Aligarh Muslim University. It was from that time on that it was very clear that Hindus and Muslims can never stay together. In course of time, it was taken to another level by Allama Iqbal, who did not seek partition, but who wanted a separate Muslim India within British India, which was in conformation with which is what Northwest India now stands for. But ultimately, Jinnah, for his own political survival after the 1937 elections, was left with no other option but to pursue the Pakistan line. And Winston Churchill always wanted that India should remain under the British by keeping the Hindus and the Muslims fighting against each other. And he was ready, he was even willing to partition India into three parts: Hindustan for Hindus, Pakistan for the Muslims, and Princetown, that is the conglomeration of the princely states. So he wanted India to be divided into three parts. Unfortunately for the British and for Mr. Jinnah, it was Sardar Patel and his deputy, Mr. V.P. Menon, who put a spanner in the wheels. It was because of them that India is what India is today. This is only a gist of the thing that I have, that gist of the things. When I would rather request each and everyone to kindly go through the book, because it is dealt with in detail. About all these events are dealt with in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So I think today the audience witnessed something which not discussed generally regarding the Independence Day of India, and also the controversies regarding the partition plan. So I would request everybody on the stream to, if you can, go and buy the book and read it. Whatever has been discussed in the stream, the book will contain number of these incidents, and you will get to know exactly how it happened. It will have references, it will have details in terms of dates and individuals who are there. The people who are interested knowing more about it, knowing more revelations which might come out of this book, please go ahead and buy the book. Doctor, is that book available only on Amazon, or is it also available in Audible or in Kindle format?
No. As of now, it is only available on Amazon India, Amazon International, and in Kindle, and on Kindle.
And one more thing, is that book, if somebody doesn't want to use Amazon, can they also directly order the book from the publisher? Is that an option available?
They can write to me. And I will courier the book to them.
Okay. So what we will do is, I'll share the email address that you have in the description, and we will mention that in case somebody wants to use, because a lot of people might not use Amazon. So as a convenience and option, we will add.
They can also call. They can also. Sorry for interrupting, but they can also WhatsApp me on the number, on my number, and I will immediately along with their address, so that I can immediately get in touch with them and we can do the needful.
Sure. So I will share both the details, your email address as well as your WhatsApp number in the description,
Yes.
so that in case they want to order the book directly from you, they can do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I look forward to
Okay.
the support of one and all.
Yes, yes, yes. We are certainly there to help you. I think I have
Thank you.
read a few pages of the book. It's really interesting. So the thing
Thank you.
which stood out for me as the book was the simplicity of the language in which the book actually deals with a lot of complex issues, and the amount of details and concise details which are there in chronology, which actually makes sense in terms of understanding a complex sis- situation and history itself. So I would say why people should buy this book. My one word answer would be this book can teach you, or you can learn Indian independence history from an 8-year-old to an 80-year-old. So you don't have to sit with the dictionary like an academic book and very difficult to understand the sentences, the words. It's written in very fluid language with common words being used. It has very good sections where it describes in terms of the format, the details, and the conclusion. So it's very easy read even for a people who don't want to read because it's very complex. It's not at all a academic writing. It's a writing which will be understood by the general people, the experts, and also the analysts. So I hope everybody would want to know more about it and order the book from the doctor himself or from the Amazon, whichever you feel comfortable with. Now, what we will do is we plan to read the third portion of the
I
book, but
must I
unfortunately,
must take this I must take this opportunity to express my thanks to all my teachers in English, who have really allowed me, or who have really enabled me to express my thoughts in the simplest possible way.
and that's the most difficult thing to do. Like people say that, okay, you must write in very complex, difficult language, then you become a scholar or somebody you are knowledgeable enough. But practically, writing or explaining a complex issue with a very simple language is the most difficult task which which we
I
have.
must interrupt here. I must interrupt here to add one point. In our medical practice, okay, we follow a book called Hutchinson, Clinical Methods by Hutchinson, in which it is mentioned that the history of the patient must be in their words and not in the words of the doctor. Because if you use the words of the doctor, or if you use a medical parlance, automatically it might create a lot of confusion. But a patient, when he tells his story, he tells it in a way which you can also understand. So therefore, my medical practice it did help me a lot in writing the way I did.
That's amazing. So being a doctor helps becoming a historian, writing historical books. Okay, so I think we don't have the time to read the third portion of the reading for today. We might do it sometime later. So now we will be taking questions from the audience. And the audience, if you want to come and ask the questions directly to the author, you can join the streams. I'll open the stream now. Now, Anandi, could you? Yeah. So we have the first question coming from
Yeah.
TRC3699, a user. So, Doctor, can you read the question so you can answer it?
Yeah. It's only good evening, Dr. Saab. This is Prashant. Nice seeing you in this interview on India's journey to freedom. It's my pleasure as well. It's my pleasure as well to be to use this platform to inform you about what happened, because it is something which each and every one of us should know, so that we can share it with our next generation. It is something that we owe to them, and it is something that we should be proud to share with them. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have also highlighted a specific link for joining it. Yeah, doctor, you can ask the second. You can answer the second question.
What were the reasons that the revolutionaries were so proud of serving their culture and heritage? See, at that point in time, uh, like Bharat Mata was portrayed to each and everyone to be in chains. And everyone was asked the simple question, are you willing to see your mother in chains? So obviously the question was no. And that was the first point on the basis of which they were ready. When they means the revolutionaries were ready to lay down their lives for the sake of ensuring that Bharat Mata was free and no longer in chains. That was an excellent platform or excellent way through which people from various parts of the country could be brought together, because ultimately at the end of it, it is the force of the mother that binds us to our own family. And India being such a big family, it was obviously Bharat Mata who was the binding force. Regarding the second part of the question, their successors mostly became part of leftism. I would beg to differ there. The problem here is the problem here being that most of the revolutionaries who still survived in free India were forced to change their tracks, because the ruling dispensation made it very clear that we despise revolutionaries. So the obvious option that they had was to become a leftist. And if you see, the Congress at that time, even prior to the freedom struggle, was divided into two parts. That is the right and the left. And the right were mostly the moderates, and the left were mostly those who believed in the spirit of revolution. So ultimately, I do think that it was uh, the wrong sticker, if I may use the word, with which the revolutionaries actually were tagged. I don't think that, and at that time they were left with no other option but to be labeled as leftists. Even to the best of my ability, I don't think, even to the best of my knowledge, I don't think that most of of the revolutionaries, they had that that particular communism in them. It is like, say for example, if I may use if I can use the word, that most of the revolutionaries came from Bengal. And in Bengal at that time, especially post-partition, there was so much of disorder. There was so much of, there was so much of pain that when the people protested against it, they became a part of the left cabal. But by itself, I don't think it is correct to say that most of their successors became a part of the left. I would rather feel that because of lack of options, they adopted and they were identified as members of the left. That's my point of view. What would be the assessment of Surendranath Banerjee's views and contribution? See, this is a good question in the sense that prior to the advent of extremists, okay, that is prior to the 1905 Surat Congress, most of the members of the Congress, of the Indian National Congress, were from the educated background. That is, they were either lawyers or they were, or they were journalists. The masses were not involved. And most of these educated people, they were fine in becoming subjects of the British Empire. And they were ready to be subjects of the British Empire because they had confidence in what was so-called the virtues of the British Empire. And this included Mr. Gandhi as well. It was only with the after the first partition of Bengal was announced by Lord Curzon in 1904-05, and with the advent of people like Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, that the Indian National Congress was forced to adopt the particular resolution on the basis of which they declared that Congress should now stand for Swadeshi. Congress should stand for independence. Prior to that, under various persons, including Mr. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Mr. Firoz Shah Mehta, and others, that Congress was considered to be a party of the moderates. In fact, after the 1905 Surat session, Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was suspended by the Congress, and Mr. Firoz Shah Mehta and others, they wrote the constitution of the Congress in such a way that Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak could not again come back into the Congress. It was only in 1915, in the December session, after Mr. Gopal Krishna Gokhale passed away in February 1915, and Mr. Firoz Shah Mehta passed away in November 1915, that a resolution was adopted for the entry of Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak into the Congress. Prior to that, the constitution of Congress was modified in such a way that Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was not allowed to re-enter the Congress, in spite of the fact that he was supported by Mrs. Annie Besant. So therefore, Surendranath Banerjee also to some extent concurred with this view, but since he was from Bengal and he bore the brunt of the partition of Bengal, he did change his line of opinion, but at the end of it, he did subscribe to the fact that Congress doesn't require the revolutionaries or the extremists. But I am not belittling. I am not belittling the fact that he was a great freedom fighter, because it was he who for the first time decided that the various political entities from all over India should come on a common platform to air their views. This was as far as 1885, 1884, and by December 1885, the Indian National Congress saw the light of the day. Although it was not set up with the intentions that Mr. Surendranath Banerjee had. It was A.O. Hume who set up the Indian National Congress as a sort of a platform on which the political discourse could be aired, and the British could then take remedial measures accordingly to address the concerns of the Indians. So it was more like a sort of a safety valve, if I can use the simile. It was more of like a safety valve rather than a political forum. And that is the reason as to why, from the time that the British realized that the Congress was being used to hijack, if I can use the word, hijack the Indian freedom movement, that the British and the Indian civil servants were asked not to attend the meeting of the Congress. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
doctor.
madam.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Doctor, we have a very specific question, a very interesting question from Nandi. I'll just put it up. So, Nandi asked, were there any unexpected or surprising findings during your research that changed your understanding of the freedom movement?
There were so many,
You
and
can
there
share
were so
one.
many, and that is the reason I feel it is worthwhile to go through the book at
If you can
every
mention
step.
one for the audience.
Yeah, for example, how many of us we just discussed about the two nation theory, right?
Yes.
We all feel that the two nation theory was born out of Mr. Jinnah. But how many of us know that even Mr. Jinnah put forward his two nation theory? It was in 1885 that Said Ahmad Khan put forward his two nation theory. So that means what we have been taught is absolutely unfactual. We are not taught the correct things, because Said Ahmad Khan made it very clear that Muslims should not support a Hindu Congress. How many of us know that? So the distinction between a Hindu Congress and a Muslim League was as clear as the sky by 1800s. We think that it was only brought to the fore during 1947. It is far from the truth. It is there. It was actually a part of the line of thought of many Muslims reformers, especially people like Said Ahmad Khan, that Hindus and Muslims cannot live together. So
Thank
that
you, doctor.
really, welcome.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we have only 7 minutes left before the stream need to end. But we have one last question that I would like you to answer, and I think this is quite pertinent in terms of research and the time it required to write this book. So, if you can just enlighten us on this.
The entire process, it took me about 2.5 years, because I used to set myself a certain a certain time frame for each topic, and I used to ensure that come what may, I live to that particular deadline, because I knew that if I don't live to that deadline, I might reach a point where I might lose interest and digress. So I did not want to indulge myself into that. So if I may give an example, so Sunday night after I finished discussing with my family, I decided for the next 2 weeks, and I used to tell them that 2 weeks from now, when we again meet, when we again sit together, these are the topics I shall talk to you, and these are the topics that I shall discuss with you. So I used to work to that particular timeline. Some of the challenges, yes, some of the challenges were there. For example, if an emergency came along, if a medical emergency came along, like it happened the other day, I informed you of,
Yeah.
then obviously I had to, reschedule it by another couple of days. Because the problem with emergencies is that until the patient settles down, you have to be there by his or their side. You have to be there by their side. Then talk to the attendant. So it involves a lot of time. And the most important thing is that with the Dr. Google always there, it becomes that much important for us to know, to be sure of what we are talking. Because whatever we tell, the attendants are going to, cross-check with Dr. Google.
Yes, thank you for the question. So, Nandi, do you have anything you want to ask to Dr. Bhumik? Nandi is in the call. We have 5 minutes left.
Mm, mhm. So
Yeah, go ahead.
Doctor, how was the narrative around the India's independence changed over time after independence?
It has not changed. It is for
So it
us.
was the
I
narrative
mean,
was the same from before.
yes, yes, the narrative is still the same. Yes, it has
Mhm,
changed slightly because now, for example, we are paying a lot of respect to people like Sardar Patel, to
mhm,
the revolutionaries, which earlier wasn't the
mhm,
norm. But otherwise, concepts like transfer of power and independence, they are they are treated as one and the same. What is the difference between a dominion status and independence? And no one really knows of it.
mhm.
So therefore, the narrative around independence or around the Indian freedom struggle has slightly changed in the sense that more number of people have now been accommodated, but there are certain crucial things that still need to be discussed and brought out into the light. I have tried to the best of my ability to do so.
So, Doctor, when can we expect your next project to be in the public?
My next second book,
Yeah.
hopefully next year, because I am now almost I'm almost at the end of writing about the various events in Europe that led to World War One. That should be over. God willing, that should be over by end of this year. But then subsequently, the topic on which I want to write about the revolutionaries will it might take me another 6 to 8 months. But I have decided that whatever it may be, I will complete these things.
Thank you, Nandi.
So
Thank you,
from
Dr.
yesterday,
Bhumik.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nandi. Sorry, Doctor. We are almost run out of time, so we have 2 minutes. So I would request Doctor to please. We should and we can have one more podcast where we can discuss the volume two of your book. Sometimes next week or whenever you are freely available. So we will have. I will request Doctor to give us the opportunity to ask more questions for the second volume of the same book, so that we have the privilege of listening to Mr. Bhaumik once again.
It will be my privilege as well to address such an august gathering.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bhaumik. Thank you, Nandi, for your assistance
Uh,
doing the backend thing.
just to add a point, if I may,
Yes,
this
please
is
go
the
ahead.
first podcast that I attended,
Mhm.
and I am not tech savvy, but things were made so easy for me. I must not only thank Mr. Mundal, but I must also thank my son for making me that much more comfortable with all the with all the intricacies. Thank you a lot. Jai Hind and Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind, Vande Mataram. Before we end, we will request everybody to go and check out Dr. Bhaumik's book on Amazon. You will have his phone number and the email address available in the descriptions once the stream ends. Go read the book and learn about the history which is not being taught, not is being told in academic books. Thank you, Dr. Bhumik. Thank you, Nandi, for everyone. Goodbye, everybody, and a happy Dhanteras and happy Diwali to you in advance. Bye bye.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Wish all of you are safe and a happy Diwali.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you.